Hi, how y'all doing? My name's Tyler. I'm the Vice President of the Winthrop College Republicans.
And my name's Leslie Lovett, and I am the Secretary of Affairs here. And today we have Mr. Micah Caskey with us. Mr. Caskey is the representative out of Springdale, correct?
Springdale, Casey, West Columbia.
Springdale, Casey, and West Columbia. He is a newly elected representative, and he is a staunch conservative who says what he believes and is a man of his convictions. So thanks for coming, Mr. Caskey.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. And started off, what made you decide to run?
Well, that's a good question because it's not a path that I think even I saw just 11 months ago. So I was in the solicitor's office in Lexington County, and one fateful March afternoon, it comes out that Kenny Bingham, who had represented our area for the last 16 years, decided that he wasn't going to run again. And so, that was a moment that I felt like, what should I do? Because I had kind of hit a point in my career. I'd served in the Marine Corps. I had worked in management consulting and then come to the solicitor's office. So I was like, what am I going to do with my own career? And I had thought that I'd get to, 2020, felt like a good round number, and that would be the point at which I'd decide where I was going to go with my career. And lo and behold, this happened, and I thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity for me to give back, to the area that I grew up in, a slightly different capacity. And so, I raised my hand, filed, and here we are.
And you also had the endorsement of Congressman Joe Wilson from Congressional District 2 when you ran. So, I mean, you must have had something going for you that the people see.
Well, I think so. I don't think I'm all bad.
And you're also the owner of Caskey Law Firm, PA.
That's right.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So South Carolina's state constitution doesn't allow you to exercise the state's authority in two capacities, right? Separation of powers. So you can't be a prosecutor in the executive branch and be a legislator in the legislative branch. So when I was elected, I had to leave and open my own practice. And so that's what that is. I practice all kinds of law: criminal defense, personal injury, workers' compensation, civil litigation, you name it, and that's what I do.
That's awesome. So going into, why you ran, what issues are most important to you?
For me, it really all turns on the question of how do we make government work for the people? For too long, in my view, government has been bound by 20th century modes of operation, that we've failed to recognize that, in my pocket I have a phone that can talk to satellites in outer space. We've failed to leverage technology to deliver to people the services that they've paid for through their taxes. And so I'm most interested in not only ensuring that individuals have the liberties that are enshrined in our founding documents, that's without question important, and enhancing those personal freedoms, because I think that ultimately is what makes America different and makes America special. But at the state level, there are opportunities to make the government work and do those things. So that's really where I think my focus is how do we make this thing work for people? Because for far too long I've heard excuses, I've heard answers that don't answer the question, which is ultimately, why haven't we done better for the people in South Carolina?
And I think that's interesting because, you being a freshman, in the legislature, there are so many other districts where there have been new legislators, and I think it's for part of that same reason where people are just fed up about government not working and they want to change something.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, Tyler. I think that ultimately came to its head with the election of Donald Trump. I don't think there's a broader or more profound statement that people are dissatisfied with what's going on. So I want to help be a part of that change.
And being a part of that change, what are you looking forward most to accomplishing this session?
So that's a good question, and one that I get fairly frequently. What I always tell people is my first goal is to figure out where the bathrooms are. In every new job, there are things like the bathrooms that you got to find out. And that's sort of a metaphor for the basic steps of how does this place run? How does it work? The lawmaking process is incredibly complex. During law school, for example, I was a law clerk for the clerk of the House. So I've had some exposure to the black line rules of how a bill becomes law. Yeah. Not really all that different than anything you would learn in a government or civics class. But there is, in fact, more levels to it. So you have a procedural mechanism. right? You got to learn that part. You've also got to learn the interpersonal dynamics, you know, because legislators are people, and they sometimes have human reactions to things, you know, and those reactions are emotional, and sometimes they're logical, and sometimes they're emotional and they're illogical. And so for me, one of my challenges as the new guy on the scene is to figure out where and how those things work together. So when you ask what are my priorities for the first session, and I would tell you that at first is to figure out, you know, who here does what. I've got to learn the rules. That's a no small undertaking. And then learn how people work with one another and how I can help others get things accomplished.
Right. That's good.
But it's a lot more, so getting a bill passed is a lot more complicated than say like Schoolhouse Rock makes you
Right?
makes it seem that.
And that's exactly right.
Leslie and I were in the legislature and we were like kind of wandering around. You got like the lobbyists, you got all these people running around. And you're like, well, what's going on?
Sure. And I guess really what inspired me in some ways to run for the legislature is my experiences in the world have been such that they've made me always wonder, why isn't anybody asking that second and third question?
Right.
So maybe a great example, if you got time for a story.
Oh yeah,
A
definitely.
little war story. So I was in Afghanistan in 2009 as a civil affairs officer. My job was to be the military liaison to civil governance structures, you know, the local district governor, tribal elders, village councils, things of that nature. I was the military liaison to those groups, as well as non-governmental organizations, NGOs, international organizations, and other government state agencies, so like the British DFID. Anyway, point of that story is that, for example, one of the things we were charged to do was to aid in some economic development projects, all as a part of increasing people's trust and confidence in the local national government. So whatever. What does that mean? Well, we might on any given day roll into a village and we'd have a meeting with the local elders and say, well, what is it that you need here to enable your people to find more liberty and personal freedoms? And they might say, well, we need a well. And I, with a pocket full of cash, could easily go, here's your well, fund it, go ahead. The challenge, though, is thinking down the line. What happens, those second and third order effects? Because if I put a well here, on the one hand, I've given you an immediate resolution to the problem you told me existed. But in reality, I know that you're getting water now because you're alive, right? So it's not that you don't have water. You just want more water, easier access to water. But if I put this well here, what have I just done? I've just vested whoever owns this land with some degree of authority, because that's a person who then does business with the U.S. government, right? Is that a person we want to vest with that authority? Moreover, what happens when this thing breaks down? Who's going to fix it? Who's going to be in charge of the distribution rights? You know, wells don't go forever. At some point they run out of water, or could run out of water. Who's going to decide that? You know, if it breaks, who's going to repair it? If it's a generator, who's going to pay for the gas? And on and on. And these questions have to be answered, because otherwise all I've done is put an enduring symbol of American ineptitude right here in the center of the Helmand province.
Right.
That doesn't win for anybody. Translate that, of course, over the ocean and back here to America. For too long, I think that we have had examples of government not thinking about how it impacts individual businesses. You know, folks who are out there trying to do things like build tables or walls or paint walls or run electrical wires, people who are really the backbone of the American economy, we've made it too difficult on them to grow those businesses. I'm interested, again, in helping government get better at delivering services to people so that they get a return on their investment.
That was beautiful. That was a vivid picture. You painted it for us, and thank you for your service.
Sure, thank you. My pleasure.
Well, you know, your service is something that makes you definitely unique, but what is another thing that people may not know about you?
I am an amateur comedian.
I can see that.
And nobody thinks I'm as funny as I think I am. I don't know. What's something interesting about me? I'm never really afraid to ask the tough questions, you know, to anybody's face. You know, one time I was in law school, and we had hit a point while I was there that I went to the University of South Carolina for law school and business school, and so law school had fallen out of the top 100 in the U.S. News and World Report rankings. right? It's a big deal. All the students were upset. Professors a little tense. So the dean at the time, who was not Dean Wilcox, the current dean that I think is fantastic, called this town hall meeting. And so, you know, everybody's sort of sitting on edge. What are we going to do about this? And so you've got a couple hundred, you know, law students and professors in this meeting. And the dean gets up and he starts giving his speech and didn't really answer anything. So being that person who's ever intrepid, I raised my hand and said, you know, Dean, you know, as I look at this situation, what I see is, you know, the fact that we've fallen out of the U.S. News and World Report rankings. In and of itself, I don't know that that really is how we should assess our own performance.
Yeah.
But I do think it's of such gravity that we should then assess where we are and where we're going. So as I look, and I sort of forget the facts now, but it's, you know, it was like increased class sizes, decreased offerings, increased or decreased scholarship, decreased scholarships, and it's like 8 things I had. So I said, I listed all those, and I said, so at the end of that, I've got to ask the question, if I am on the board of trustees at this university, I've got to ask, why should you not be fired? You could have heard a pin drop. And I say that not to say, well, look, I'm, you know, a bully of any kind. I don't mean to be that at all.
Right.
But I think there is, for too long, people have been unwilling to ask those tough questions to somebody's face and say, listen, I don't think you're necessarily a bad person or you're a bad father or a bad mother. What I do see here, though, is a lack of performance. And I want to know what we're going to do to fix that. And if it's not you that's the answer, I want to go ahead and move towards finding somebody who can fix this.
You know, it's questions like that get people thinking. I mean, you got to say it eventually, otherwise, you know, they're just gonna keep making the same mistakes. I mean,
That's right. That's right. And I think, sadly, and oftentimes tragically, in our state government, we've spent too long doing just that and accepting status quo and being afraid to confront problems. I mean, you know, look, I'm a data analytics guy. You know, the numbers say we're not hitting our objectives in any number of categories that we need to be doing better in. As a freshman legislator, I have very little power, but I have the ability to ask a question. And, you know, for the next 2 years, that's what I plan to do in a respectful and responsible way. I'm not a demagogue. I'm not a firebrand. But I am someone who's not afraid to say, why are we going to allow this? And who knows, maybe they won't let me back in 2 years.
They'll definitely want you back. And what would you say to young voters? I know you were saying you were at River Bluff High School earlier today. What is your message to young voters?
Got to get out there and pay attention. You got to care, and there's so much right now that is not being resolved in a way that we should accept. Let me just take it way out of my pay grade, right? Like, I'm a freshman state legislator, but one major issue that is going to confront all of us, and is confronting all of us, is the national debt, right? We are $20 trillion in debt. That's a number that doesn't land. What is $1 trillion? Well, let's back it up. 1 million seconds is 11 days. 1 billion seconds is 31 years. So that's the difference between a million and a billion. Here, $1 million here, $1 billion here. Remember, a million, 11 days, a billion, 31 years. Week after next, most of my life. Then you remember that a trillion is 1,000 billions. So we've got 31,000 years of seconds times 20 is our national debt.
that's crazy.
That is a problem of unprecedented magnitude. And it will be something that we cannot escape. And we cannot certainly escape it without being willing to confront and ask the hardest questions possible. You know, during this most recent presidential campaign, during one of the debates, there was some discussion, and I forget the issue specifically, but the answer was, well, our 17 national security agencies, national intelligence agencies say this. I'm sitting there going, what do you mean we have 17 national security or intelligence agencies? You know, we've got a CIA, a DIA, a DNI, an FBI. Everybody's got their own piece to this because we're still trying to stop the Soviets at the Fulda Gap in Europe. The threat has changed. We have got to be willing to re-examine our entire approach to governance structures. I think that's true at the federal level. I think it's true on the state level. Because ultimately, if we're going to resolve the challenges that are going to face young voters, whether It is a pension system that is woefully underfunded. Pick your actuarial method, somewhere between 14 and 30 some odd $billion. Whether that is the roads, pick your estimate. These things are not going away, and they're not going away anytime soon. So to young voters, I say you got to pay attention. You got to know what you believe, and then you got to do something about it. Maybe that is posting about it on Facebook to your friends. But maybe that's engaging with your legislators. Maybe that's engaging with an advocacy group. Maybe that's something else. And I think it's true whether you're on the left or you're on the right. Because make no mistake about it, to those who are conservative, the left is not stopped. They didn't go, well, we lost in 2016, so we should just accept that the conservative principles will apply in perpetuity. That's not what's happening. In fact, if anything, they've become more energized and are working even harder to ensure that we don't see another Republican president. And to those on the right, I say, if you believe that these principles matter, that limited government and expanded individual opportunity are what matter, then you have a responsibility to get engaged. Help people get educated. Help people understand what's going on in whatever way you can.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, it's just it's so great to hear the debt address, because it's just like you never hear it. I'm just like, I always see all my liberal friends, and they're like, well, we got to start spending more. I'm like, we are the ones, people our age are the ones that have to pay for it, because they're the current generation in power is going to keep pushing it off, and it's going to fall on our shoulders. And I'm just like, you don't realize that's why I'm conservative, because I don't want to pay for all this debt. It's absurd.
That's it. I think at its core, conservatism is not about not caring about people.
Right.
It's in fact just the opposite. It's about caring about people so much that you're willing to say the truth, which is that we have got to do things differently, and we cannot pretend to live in a utopian state in which hope and feelings and things are enough. I certainly don't want to poo-poo anything. I want to say, let's be truthful, let's be honest, and let's go work hard. And that ultimately is the message to young voters, young people, old voters. You got to work. For too long we've told people you don't have to work. You can just get by because you're smart or you're good looking or you got money. That's not enough. You got to work. And that's, I think, really my message.
Thank you so much for coming.
Sure, glad to be here.
And just like I said, thank you for your service, and we wish you the best time in the session this year. Thank
you very much. I'm excited to be there, and certainly anytime you guys are down, I know you'll be working in the Senate. I can even sneak you in on the House side if you want. You come have some of the coffee we steal from the Senate.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.